You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Renegade Blitz. I'm Ty Polk, joined by Chris Ward, and we're glad to be with you. And we'll have our first guest as it's time to start the season with Week 1. We'll talk about the Buffalo Bills with Greg Tompsett of the Cover One podcast. Greg, how you doing, man? It's good to see you again.
Doing great, Ty. Appreciate you and Chris having me on here. Looking forward to another great season, and no easing into this year for either team. We're jumping right in with two playoff teams right off the bat, Week 1. No messing around. We're going to find out what these teams have.
And going out to Buffalo earlier this summer, it's a beautiful place. I managed to see the downtown right there, right next to the then Blue Jays Stadium. So it was the first time being in Buffalo since I was young and trying to get into Canada. I just seen it on the road, but now being in Buffalo, I'm going like, yep, that's beautiful too. So it's nice. I would say
people rightfully give it a hard time in the winter, and it can be a little rough. But summers around the Great Lakes are awesome. It's some of the best you can find.
Hey, I'm a winter guy. We're up in Pittsburgh. We experience every season in about 30 seconds, so it doesn't really matter to me. Let's talk about the Bills, and everything really is going according to plan in Buffalo. They signed Josh Allen to a long contract extension, and outside of losing John Brown and Shaq Lawson, they are bringing back essentially the same team in 2020. How do you and the rest of Bills Mafia feel about their chances of making it back to the Super Bowl for the first time since the early 90s?
I mean, the crazy part is, as a Bills fan, I try to be objective as an analyst, but I'm ultimately a fan first. This is my born and raised, dyed in the wool favorite team. It's my favorite thing on earth. I love the Buffalo Bills more than anything I'm not related to. It's crazy that it's not crazy for me to say, yeah, they might go to the Super Bowl. Like, it's weird to watch Pete Prisco pick them to win the Super Bowl. And it's weird to watch, Andrew Brandt pick them to win the Super Bowl. And it's weird to have all these different people like, oh, all right, you're not supposed to like my team. No one's liked my team for 25 years. I don't understand how this works. So obviously the Chiefs are fantastic. I think that there's a lot of depth in the NFC North. People like the Ravens, people like the Browns, people like the Steelers. But, the Bills deserve to be in those discussions. I think they're one of the best rosters in the NFL. I think they've got young and developing talent. It looks like they did a nice job in the draft and hit on a couple nice new players. So I think it's reasonable to think the Bills are going to go on a playoff run, are going to win the division, are going to fight for a number one bye and number one seed, bye in the first round, home field advantage. And that, if you pick them over the Chiefs, to go to the Super Bowl, I don't think it's crazy. I think the Chiefs are the best team in the conference, but I think the Bills are right there.
And Greg, the Bills ran a lot of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets last year. Do you expect the same this year? Because as of right now, the Steelers secondary situation is kind of a big known, especially when they go to their sub packages. The plan, I guess, is for Cam Sutton to kick inside, and then on sub package situations, then have James Pierre go to the outside. But last year, the Steelers cornerbacks really struggled, especially going up against Stephon Diggs. What do you expect from the Bills passing game and the receiving core this year?
First, I'll say I'm a big fan of Ahkello Witherspoon, the recent acquisition. I actually wanted the Bills to go after him when he was out there with Seattle. So I know he's probably needs some time to get acclimated, and I'm not sure his health situation to get in the running for that depth rotation in the secondary. But I like Witherspoon. I think he's a really rangy, long athlete. But in Buffalo, we joke all the time that somewhere inside Brian Daboll is really like a 12-year-old playing Madden in an adult suit. The Bills pass more than anyone else in the NFL. They run 4 wide, the second most of anyone in the NFL. They run 5 wide empty, the most of anyone in the NFL. They punt the least. They go for the 4th downs the most. Like, all the stuff that you do when you're a kid playing Madden, it's crazy. Like, we were always the 3 yards on a cloud of dust and Fred Jackson, and we had Marshawn Lynch, Fred Jackson, and CJ Spiller in the same backfield all at one time. We were always, defense, tough, gut it out. And now we're the crazy high flying team that goes with it. And if you want any evidence of that, the Bills starters played 3 series this entire preseason in the Packers game. They passed the ball 17 of the first 18 plays and 29 of the first 32. They don't give a crap if you know they're going to pass the ball or not. We have Stephon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley, Gabe Davis. Best of luck. See if you can cover them. And, I can't blame them. Like they've found that Josh Allen is not a perfect quarterback, but what he does have is he has a bazooka for an arm. So what he needs is guys who can flash open visually, where they can literally beat their man and create space with separation. And then people, think that arm, strength matters and can you throw the ball 70 yards? It doesn't. That's not really where it matters. Where it matters is if Stephon Diggs breaks open and he beats his man by a yard or two, Josh Allen can get the ball there before the cornerback can do anything about it. You can't break on the ball in time because he's already rifled the ball in there, and that you're like, oh crap, it's already by me, and they already have the completion. Well, they added Cole Beasley who can do that. They added Emmanuel Sanders who can do that. And then if you want to press up, Gabe Davis is pretty good down the field. So I don't anticipate any change. I expect them to be right there in the highest pass rate in the NFL. I think it's going to push 65, maybe 70% with 35% rushing. And I think they're going to be going for it on fourth down as much or more than any team. I think they're going to, again, probably punt the fewest in the NFL. That's just the kind of offense they're going to have. They're going to play ultra aggressive. They're going to put the ball in Josh Allen's hands, and they're going to trust that he's going to lead them to the right decision.
And that's the beauty of having a franchise quarterback. That's what the Steelers have been feeling for years. That's what you guys seen with Tom Brady up in New England. And now let's talk about Josh Allen. The expectations are already sky high. I have him as my personal favorite to win the MVP this year. So what's your thoughts on Josh Allen? Do you think he finally gets that MVP?
So obviously it's not a crazy vote. He was second in MVP voting last year, and this offense completely centers around him. So all the passing that's there, when they rush the ball, he runs the ball as much as anybody else out of the team. But it's probably a third Singletary, a third Moss, and a third Josh Allen. So from a fantasy football standpoint, by all means, draft yourself Josh Allen. He's going to get you a lot of points. When you go over everything that's there, I think there's plenty of people that rightfully are saying, well, last year was fine, but I want to see it again. I want to see what else you got. I want to see if people can adjust. And down the stretch last year, teams started early on going heavy man and saying, you're not going to be able to beat this. You're not going to be able to have the discipline to sit in the pocket and make the throws. And he did, and started just slicing people up. So towards the end of the season, teams started switching over heavily into zone. And at first he did struggle to have the discipline and the patience to take what was given to him. And then he did that down the stretch. And you saw the primetime matchups, one, unfortunately, against you guys, and then lighting up the Broncos and destroying the Patriots on Monday Night Football. And then, only playing a half, but putting up 56 on the Dolphins before heading into the playoffs. That was because he got more comfortable doing the pick your poison. So I think I get it. Why a lot of fans, both of the Bills and outside of the Bills Mafia, are saying, well, that was the most, the greatest historic improvement in history. He has to regress and take a step back. Nobody can keep up that pace. I don't think that's crazy. And I've tried to explain to a lot of Bills fans, if you look at Patrick Mahomes after his 50 touchdown, 5,500 yard season, or you look at Tom Brady after his 50 touchdown season, or you look at Peyton Manning after his 50 touchdown season, or Aaron Rodgers after his MVP season, you can take a step back. It's that, does your step back still end up at 4,500 yards and 42 touchdowns? Or does your step back end up at 3,500 yards and 28 touchdowns and 16 interceptions? That's going to be the key, is that he can take a little bit of a step back and still be excellent and still be very, very good. He can't take a huge step back. And so far, the work he's done in the offseason, stripping his mechanics down to the studs, building him back up with Jordan Palmer, doing all those things would seem to indicate that there's some sustainability in there. But I understand why people want to see it on the field and want to see it proven to them.
And how do you feel about Devin Singletary and Zach Moss going into this season? I know I was going to ask if you expect them to be a little bit more balanced this year, but it seems like they're going to be the same, pass heavy, offense. But what do you think about the two running backs in the backfield?
So I'm not going to advocate for you to go out and draft them in fantasy. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of consistent value or volume there. What the Bills are really focused on is when we decide to run, we want to be more effective at it. We don't want it to be that we're only handing off here and there just to make you respect the play action. The Bills run the most play action in the NFL. Are you going to just kind of completely give up on that because we're not really going to run the ball? What they need is to hit a couple more effective runs. And I'm not talking about like 80-yard, breakaway runs, but more of the 15, 20-yarders where you're hitting for a decent sized play, really making an impact, effective, efficient running the ball, because teams are having to play back further and give you more space because of Josh Allen's arm and because of the receiving talent. They couldn't do that last year. Even when it was a light box with 6 defenders in the box, they were still below average in rushing into that. So part of that was a big focus of the offensive line. Part of that was a focus of the running backs. But for the most part, we're bringing back the same team. It's mostly the same offensive line. They didn't have both Cody Ford and John Feliciano healthy at the same time last year. So both of them are going to be healthy right off the bat. Ike Botker was a guy that was kind of a, off the scrap heap UDFA type guy. He played pretty well and started half the games. He's still kind of the swing backup guard. Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams are so very good tackles. Mitch Morris is a really good center, but they're all better pass blocking than they are run blocking, which of course that's what you're going to invest in. So I think they can be a little bit more effective, but I don't expect it to be a huge part of the offense. But Zach Moss and Devin Singletary both look pretty good, but I think they're both going to be, the 400, 500, 600-yard guys, maybe together they cobble together 1,000 yards, but I'd almost be surprised if they did just because of how heavy the pass game influence will be.
And let's also talk about the Bills' offensive line. You touched on it a little bit with Feliciano and the bunch, but how do you think you're going to match up against the Steelers' pass rush? There's uncertainty right now with the team. TJ Watt didn't play at all during the preseason due to what seems to be an almost finished contract dispute, but we're still waiting for words if he even got signed right now to that. And of course, Stephon Tuitt, who's had a pretty rough offseason with the loss of a family member and also a knee injury. He's not currently in shape, and he'll be inactive for this game.
Yeah, obviously the Steelers, regardless of what people think about last year's, what version of Ben Roethlisberger are we going to get? Are you going to be able to utilize the weapons? This defense is still very, very legit. A lot of people don't know Tyson Alualu, and looking at that, but still having Cam Hayward, again, you mentioned Tuitt's situation. Watt makes a big difference, man. That's a really tough one. I don't love Melvin Ingram and Alex Highsmith getting to play off of that without help. But if it's just Ingram and Highsmith and Watt's not there, I feel a little more comfortable that Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams can manage that. Hayward's going to have a huge advantage internally. We don't have anybody that can match up with him. He wrecked some of the game last time, but the Bills are pretty good at getting the ball out fast enough. And obviously Josh Allen is a nightmare to sack. You guys experienced that for 15 years of Roethlisberger and guys kind of holding on to him while he's slinging the ball and you just can't get him down. Josh is kind of that new guy where he's going to throw the ball while guys are at his feet and wrapped around him and trying to pull him down, and he still gets the ball out. So I trust him to survive that, but I feel a lot more nervous about it if TJ Watt's in there. So I'm going to assume that the Steelers know what's best for them and that this team isn't going anywhere without their Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and that's going to get straightened out before the game and in time for him to get some practice reps. I know Tomlin's a big fan of, getting legitimate practice reps in there before a guy plays. I'm going to assume he's going to be there and that front seven is going to be an issue. I'm hoping, like what Chris mentioned earlier, that the Bills can take advantage of some of the changeover in the secondary. But that front seven is going to be a problem no matter what.
Then moving on to the Bills defense, the rushing defense allowed 123.2 yards on the ground last year, which ranked 20th in the league last year. What's the expectations for them this year? Is that an area, obviously, that they want to improve a lot and is up front in the run game?
Yeah, so obviously a piece of that, Star Lotulelei opted out last year, late, and that wasn't announced until mid-August. You couldn't really do anything to replace that. He was the only real one technique defensive tackle on the roster. So they were playing 285-pound Ed Oliver out of position at one tech, and that's just obviously not what he's for. And other guys that just weren't well. So Quentin Jefferson, who is drafted to be kind of a hybrid defensive end, hybrid defensive tackle, he was playing one technique reps. And having Starback is big. Harrison Phillips is the other guy. He tore his ACL. He's back and looking pretty good. So having the two stout run defenders back is a big deal. That helps Ed Oliver play his natural position. That keeps Tremaine Edmunds and Matt Milano clean to be able to make tackles. I don't think they're all of a sudden going to be a good run defense. They're just not. They are set up. Every focus is on the secondary, pass rush, and they focus on the pass on offense. They focus on the pass on defense. They have very good pass coverage. They're going to let you catch a million balls underneath. They're going to rally and tackle. They let up the fewest deep balls in the NFL last year, and they've been in the bottom 2 or 3 over the last 3 or 4 years. That's what Sean McDermott's defense does. He doesn't give up deep balls. If you're in fantasy this week, Deontay Johnson and Juju are going to catch a lot of balls. That's just how it works. They're going to let them catch a lot underneath. They're going to rally up and tackle. I'm nervous about the matchups against the number 2 cornerback here. So obviously the run defense, Najee Harris is going to be a problem, but the Bills are basically going to dare teams to say, hey, if you think your running game can keep up with our passing game, best of luck. We'll go shot for shot with that all day. I'm nervous about whoever Trey White's not covering, and that is it an advantage, whether it's Deontay Johnson, whether it's Chase Claypool. I hope they put Trey on Claypool because I think Claypool is a huge physical mismatch for Levi Wallace, but I'm nervous about Levi Wallace keeping up with either Juju or Deontay Johnson as the extra guy there. So the run defense, it's not going to be the strength of the Bills. They're going to give that up. I think Najee Harris is going to have a good game, but it's hard in today's modern NFL to stay disciplined, to keep giving the ball and not to try to take shots downfield. And as soon as you do, if Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are there and they get you into, all right, it's 2nd and 10 now. Are you going to try to run the ball again? Okay. And then they pin the defensive ears back and they get after you with the pass rush and they use the secondary. So if you can stay ahead of the sticks and continue to run the ball well on first down, there's a chance you could put together a huge run game. They just roll the dice that most teams don't have the discipline to keep doing it.
Yeah, and up front, the Steelers' offensive line, they're returning just one starter from last year, so it's going to be pretty much a completely different unit that the Bills' defensive line's going to be going up against. They're going to be starting 2 rookies, Kendrick Green at center and Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle. So the battle up front should be interesting on Sunday.
For sure.
And also, you mentioned a little bit about that linebackers trio, really, of Matt Milano, Pro Bowler Tremaine Edmunds, and A.J. Klein. And you mentioned a little bit about the Steelers' new weapon with Najee Harris. You also have to account to the tight ends as well. I know that around this time, Ebron kind of went a little bit south, but they have a new tight end number 1 much sooner than what I thought of in Pat Freiermuth. So what's going to be the plan with those guys defending them? Because I know they're going to try to limit Najee Harris getting those checkdowns that he did against the Lions that got a pretty good gain. And also Freiermuth had a nice 2-touchdown game against Detroit.
So when Milano's healthy, he's excellent guarding tight ends. He's very, very good. He wasn't healthy for a lot of last year. And you saw the Bills went up against a murderer's row. They played Waller, they played Kelsey, they played Kittle, they played every good tight end, and those guys ate, during those games. So Milano's healthy early on. I think he'll be fine with Freiermuth. He's a physical mismatch, so maybe there's some concern in the red zone, some plays where he's able to go up and get the ball and Milano just can't do much about it, but he's not going to shake him and create separation to get open. It's going to be that he can use his size to leverage against it. I don't know that anybody's going to guard Najee Harris well out of the backfield. That dude is an elite athlete for his size, and his receiving ability was really underrated coming out of Alabama. Buffalo did a lot of work on him, and would have been totally fine if he fell to them at pick 30. I think that it's still manageable, and those are the kind of plays that the Bills defense want to funnel towards. If you want to just throw the 3-yard outs to Johnson and Juju and you want to throw the swing passes to Najee out of the backfield, the Bills will allow that all day long. Now you get going on a wheel route, you get him going on some arrow routes out of the backfield, and he's able to really get into space. He might be able to give Tremaine Edmunds a little bit of trouble. A.J. Klein is the 3rd linebacker in name only. The Bills run nickel 92% of the time. They literally literally now list their starting defense as a nickel defense. Taron Johnson is listed as the starter. They run AJ Klein basically in heavy personnel goal line packages about only. So they're pretty good on not allowing him to get isolated in coverage. So it'll be interesting to see if the Steelers try to dictate that with maybe a fullback, 2 tight end sets, and then try to pass out of those sets to see if they can get Klein on the field, because he's definitely a minus in coverage. If you can get him, if they ever get Najee Harris isolated and AJ Klein, I'm going to throw my remote at the TV and say swear words. That is not something the Bills want to get into. If it's Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, I'll take my chances. Najee's going to win plenty of those matchups, but those are some, elite level athletes. They can keep up for the most part. And I don't think Najee's going to destroy them that way. I think he's going to have a big game either way, because the Bills don't have great run defense and they let up a lot of checkdowns out of the backfield. They're just going to trust that the Bills are going to come up with more big plays and limit the big plays from the Steelers, and hope that overall, as the game wears on, that nets out and lets them come out with a win.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the Bills, they're second. This is, I think, the big key of the game is because the Bills, the last 2 seasons, the Bills, when they won, their secondary had a great performance. Tre'Davious White, Levi Wallace is the number 2 cornerback, Hyde at safety, and Jordan Poyer is the other safety. And you kind of touched on how you think Tre'Davious White's going to be going up against Chase Claypool, but and last year Taron Johnson had that 51-yard pick 6 on Roethlisberger. That was really the big play of the game, and this is going to be Matt Canada's first game as an offensive coordinator, and he's going to be going up against Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier's defense. Last 2 seasons, the Bills have allowed just 10 and 15 points respectively in their last 2 games against the Steelers. What do you expect from the secondary going up against the Steelers receivers?
So obviously in today's NFL, you're not going to be super deep everywhere. The Bills have a very good secondary. The top 3 guys are excellent. I think Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are Pro Bowl level safeties, one of the best safety tandems in the NFL. Trey White is a top 5 corner in the NFL and deserves the All-Pro votes and the Pro Bowl votes that he gets. Levi Wallace is a little underrated in the sense that he's a legitimate starting quarterback. He's a average number 2 cornerback. He's not a problem. He's not a guy to be picked on, but he's not special. He's a UDFA. He was a walk-on at Alabama. He was a UDFA in the NFL. They keep bringing in different guys every year. They brought in, Vontaze Davis. They brought, who retired at halftime. They brought in Kevin Johnson. They brought in Josh Norman. Every year they bring in somebody else. This year was Dane Jackson out of Pitt to compete with him. Every single year, Levi Wallace beats him out and keeps the starting job. They always try to bring somebody in, and he just keeps winning the competitions. He's not a special athlete, so he's sound in coverage, really good tackler, really good with technique, but he's not a special athlete. I can live with that against Juju Smith-Schuster. I can live with that where it's, hey, keep your technique, stay where you are, rally and tackle. I can't deal with that against Chase Claypool. Like, Chase Claypool is a special athlete, even amongst NFL athletes. Those guys, that's not what Levi Wallace does well. That is not his forte. So they don't do a ton of trail technique. Trey White every once in a while will trail a team, but it's normally when it's a DeAndre Hopkins level guy, when it's a Calvin Ridley level guy, where it's somebody where, hey, he's the only guy on that team. You have to go with that. With a receiving core like the Steelers, I have a feeling they're just going to keep, Trey on the right and Levi on the left and cover whoever comes over there. So I'm a little nervous that Canada is going to scheme some stuff with Levi Wallace to try to get Claypool over there, or even James Washington on a deep ball, something like that, where just the athleticism could be an issue. Taron Johnson is pretty good in short area space. He tackles really, really well. He's not going to win any sprint contests either. He's not going to, shut down Deontay Johnson, but he's going to tackle well and he's going to come up. And obviously you saw, he can make big plays because not only with Big Ben, but you guys saw him do it to Lamar Jackson in the playoff game and take 101 yards back for a touchdown. So he's very good at baiting quarterbacks, floating in zone, jumping into passing lanes. He's going to continue to do that pretty well. The Bills don't have a ton of depth in the secondary. That's actually one of my concerns going into the year. I like all the starters. The 5 guys across the board are solid. They're going to be okay against the Steelers receivers, but the Steelers have a really deep receiving core. So I'm nervous about some of those matchups. That's one of the areas that if you were going to ask me to draw up a recipe for a Steelers win, it's going to be big game out of Najee Harris and then a couple big plays to Claypool, James Washington, taking advantage of matchups when they hit a couple of those deep plays that the Bills don't normally give up, but that you're able to isolate somebody in a matchup there, and that Harris and then one of those guys has a big game and they're able to make the difference.
We have to ask one thing. Damar Hamlin, you guys drafted him in the 5th round, and he went to Pittsburgh Central Catholic and Pitt. And just to make sure we have a couple Steelers fans who also are Pitt fans as well, we want to know, how has he looked in training camp in the preseason? There's no chance for him to take any of those snaps from Poyer or Hyde, but you have to imagine he looked pretty good out there.
Oh, absolutely. So my partner on my show, Aaron Quinn, is the president of the Damar Hamlin fan club. He has looked fantastic. It's not, like you said, the Bills are in a luxury where no one's really looking for him to get snaps when you have Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, but he absolutely looks like the succession plan. He absolutely looks like he's going to step in. They're both 31 and 32. So it might not be forever. You might be talking a year or two here. He has looked the part. The Bills had a guy, Dean Marlowe, for a couple of years here, who was always kind of the scrappy, like third safety, backup nickel, special teams contributor, could play all the different roles. Hamlin not only stepped right into that role, he took his jersey number. He took the 31 jersey number and has stepped right into that role. He's the first safety on the field after those guys come off. He's played some backup nickel. He's played some like dime linebacker. He's played on special teams. I think he's going to be active on game day. I think he's going to contribute. Probably not a ton of defensive snaps, short of an injury or something weird going on. But I know on draft day, I think Mel Kiper at one point had him as the best player available for like 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 45 minutes. And the Bills getting him in the 5th round was a steal. So getting him at the point they did, I was really, really excited. And, he has looked the part. I don't think he's going to be some, magical all pro that they stumbled upon, but he looks like a good player who's going to start in this league for a long time.
Coming down to our last couple questions here, but who do you think will have a big game for Buffalo on Sunday?
Well, obviously it's hard not to pick Stephon Diggs. As soon as you find somebody who can cover him, it'll be the first one. So whether it was Stephon Gilmore, JC Jackson, Xavier Rhodes, any of the top cornerbacks that have tried to cover him, that dude is really hard to cover. So I don't anticipate that stopping on Sunday. I expect him to have a pretty big game. Obviously, this offense flows through Josh Allen, and that he's going to be a part of the rushing and the passing. And the sneaky guy that I'll mention is Emmanuel Sanders. I think a lot of people assumed he was kind of washed up last year because he was playing with Taysom Hill and whatever was left of Drew Brees' right shoulder. He was getting open a lot more than he was getting the ball, and he has looked really sharp in camp. That dude can run a route still exceptionally well at 34 years old. I think he's going to have a sneaky season here and be another option that when the teams try to drop into zone before they could pay a lot of attention to Cole Beasley. Now they got Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, and that's really tough to stop those guys from finding a soft spot in the zone. I think Sanders is going to have a sneaky season.
And what is your biggest concern in this game?
So my biggest concern is obviously rush defense. Najee Harris going off for 200 plus yards, something crazy like that, and just gashing the defense for 15, 20-yard gains. The pass rush in the front seven from the Steelers getting after Josh Allen. He is hard to sack, but also almost to his detriment. Sometimes tries to keep plays alive. He is very good at fighting those things off, but sometimes doesn't see the secondary rusher coming, and you can strip the ball or get the ball from him because he's fighting off one guy, trying to stiff arm Aaron Donald while the next pass rusher is coming at him. So those would be the two areas that concern me. Is that The Bills don't know this offensive line. Maybe Matt Canada and the O-line coach has been able to scheme something up, and this offensive line is more ready than people realize, and that Najee Harris is an exceptional talent, and that between the Pittsburgh running game and the Pittsburgh front seven, you're able to slow the game down and pull it down into the mud and not let the Bills passing game get rolling. And you're able to slow it down into a slogging, ugly game. And then all of a sudden the Steelers have the lead and are doing the 4-minute drill, just killing the clock. That kind of thing would be my concern, that the front seven and the rush game give them problems.
And to wrap things up, do you have a prediction for the game?
So obviously I don't think it's great that TJ Watt hasn't practiced with the first team defense all training camp. I'm going to assume that Watt plays. If he doesn't, I don't think it's great. I think that's a big difference maker, that he is one of those players that can single-handedly turn a game and make one of those, strip sack fumbles, fumble return for a touchdown, get to Josh Allen for a pick six. I think it's going to take a couple big plays. I think in Buffalo, the entire unit, the entire roster returning, same GM, same assistant GM, same head coach, same offensive coordinator, same defensive coordinator, same quarterback coach, same quarterback, 10 of 11 starters, 15 of the top 16 offensive players. Everyone's back from a team that put up 500 points. I think the Bills are going to score enough for it to matter. I think 6.5 points is a lot in the spread, but I think it's going to be that kind of game. Right now, I would probably pick Buffalo 31, Pittsburgh 27, something like that. I think the Steelers are going to hang in the game. It's going to be close. I do think the Bills are going to be able to score in that passing game with the changeover in the secondary is going to be just enough for that Steelers defense to struggle. I think they're going to be able to go away from Hayden and Fitzpatrick and focus on the other areas in the secondary and chip away over and over. And I think eventually it'll wear them down to that point. But there absolutely is a recipe where I can see a Steelers win. And I hope the Bills are able to avoid that.
Yeah, we're also worried about what's going on with TJ Watt. The fact that they haven't got it done yet this far into it's kind of concerning. I know the Steelers are they're pretty, they're sticklers on guaranteed money. I guess they kind of be they're kind of hard to negotiate there. But I mean, I'm even worried. Like even Keith Butler, the defense coordinator, mentioned that he's concerned about his hitting shape, because no doubt TJ Watt's his physical shape is amazing, but he hasn't got any live hits in or going up against a tackle yet. So, yeah. And I'm not too sure what the weather is like going to be in Buffalo, week one game. So it's a little bit worrying about the conditioning and see how that goes.
Players talk all the time where it's easy to think you're in shape, but you're not in like football shape. Like that's really hard to simulate or to be able to, kind of just prepare yourself for. So it's going to be nice weather. I think it's like 75 and sunny. It's going to be a normal, nice day. But it's still, TJ Watt's a special athlete. He's going to be able to just show up and play. It's fine. I expect them to sign a deal. They didn't create all that cap space for nothing. They created the cap space. They're ready to make the deal. I expect it to be announced tonight or tomorrow or sometime leading up to the game and for him to play. I will be genuinely surprised if that's not the case.
Well, I'd rather play Buffalo in September in Buffalo than go up there in November, December, any time of the year. So
you're not wrong.
Or if they were playing in Miami week one game, it's always hot down in Florida,
Yeah, those could be gross.
But Greg, thanks so much for coming on to the show, and hopefully we'll see the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl. If not, it's got to be the Steelers. Sorry. But
I can respect it, man. I appreciate it.
All right, so that was Greg Tompsett of Cover One, and we thank him for coming on the show. And just to have our final predictions there, I'm going to say 27-21 Bills. I had this as a loss all the way back whenever the schedule was announced, and I'm still going to keep it that way. And especially even with the news of Watt coming in there right now, that's week one. I expect the Bills to come out charged up. They're basically a Super Bowl contender. So, yeah, it's going to be a loss, but it's going to be a good loss for the Steelers. They're going to be competitive still.
Yeah, this is a daunting task to go up to Buffalo. Week one, they have a high-flying offense. Josh Allen's an amazing quarterback. Yeah, and just their offensive line situation and uncertainty of TJ Watt. I think he's going to play though, but not having to it. And then the new look secondary, somewhat. When they go to their sub packages, I think there's just too many question marks here for this Week 1 game, and I'm gonna have Buffalo winning 30-20.
Yeah, those question marks are going to be really important. But this game, we're probably going to see someone step up that at least gets us more comfortable as the season goes along. I expect James Pierre to kind of be thrown into the fire here, and maybe with the new acquisition, Othello Witherspoon, maybe he can become that outside corner. But right now, it's just too early. Let's get these guys in there and try to get them up to standard, and hopefully get TJ Watt up to standard, and then eventually later in the season, Stephon Tuitt back up to his standard before we start trying to figure out what else is going to go on here.
And as Greg mentioned, Stephon Diggs, man, they're going to have a handful covering him. We saw that last year. He's just a great route runner. One of the top receivers in the league, I think. Just a tremendous talent.
And so I'm still keeping with my prediction that I had during the schedule release. That was 10-7 Steelers. Chris, are you going to change anything?
I had them 7-9, 7-10 back in May. I'm sorry, Steelers fans, but I want to bump it up to 8-9. There's a lot of question marks with this team, I think, and it's mainly on the offensive line. I mean, look, there's only one new starter coming back, and that's Chuks Okorafor, who didn't really look too impressive in the preseason or training camp. Left tackle Dan Moore Jr. is starring out there. That's a big task for just a rookie, and at one of the most important positions at left tackle. Zach Banner, I'm not too sure what's going on. I guess he regressed in his recovery from the ACL injury that he had in Week 1 last year. I think the offensive line is just what I'm worried about. And Roethlisberger, how about you, Todd? Do you think he's going to play entire 17 games this year?
No, I don't think that was the plan. That was the plan with that at all. Unless the Steelers are basically fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the season, I don't expect them playing 17 games off of that principle. I think they'll get their playoff spot, but it's going to be very close. And I think at one point they're probably going to hold him back.
Either that if he stays healthy, or how's he going to perform late in the year? Because, we saw him fade down the stretch last year, and, he said he was worn out. And I know in the offseason he said that, it's changed now that he's year 2 from recovery on his elbow surgery. So, he might not be as worn out this year, but that's my main concern. And I guess on defensively, I do like that they got Ingram there, and Alex Highsmith has looked really good. I'm kind of worried about the secondary and how they replace Mike Hilton, and what are they going to do when they go to those sub package situations, and also to add, they have a really tough schedule too.
When it comes to the Steelers offensive line, I'm not worried about what they're going to do run blocking wise, because I believe in a zone running scheme. And whenever this team has decided to run in the preseason, they looked good. So in terms of run blocking, if they can establish the run, I think that'll help out with a lot of the offensive line issues. My worries is, of course, with pass blocking. And with that, and that's going to be the key of everything, because pass blocking is going to be the difference between us seeing these new concepts from Matt Canada, or the Steelers going back to their old ways that they had last year that just wasn't enough to do anything. That wasn't an NFL offense at times. That was barely an FCS offense out there at times. So that's going to be the key right there. When they get punched in the mouth by these teams, and when they get punched in the mouth by injuries and just the general season length, what are they going to do in those situations? Are they going to stay the course, or are they going to revert back to their old ways?
Yeah, and now with their 10-7 record, do you have them winning the division, or do you have them getting into the playoffs as a wild card?
They're in as a wild card. Officially, I have until Cleveland proves me otherwise, I have them winning the division. I have the Ravens finishing third in the division. I still have Cincinnati in the basement. I think the Ravens, it's kind of I'm going to say they're going to go 8-9. I think it's just a lot of things, and maybe that's just the bitter Steelers fan in me when it comes to the Ravens.
do you think 10-7 is the ceiling for the Steelers this you think, or do you think like 11-6 or something like that?
I think 10-7 is the ceiling for the Steelers.
Okay.
The floor is probably 8-9. The floor is 8-9. But
8-9?
because
Okay.
I just believe that with a Mike Tomlin coach team, there has to be absolute nuclear fallout for them to go under 500. And yes, if it was a 16-game season, that's 8-8, and they still remain at 500, and that's a non-losing season, and that's all good and well. But I just think for this team, if it goes down to a winning season versus a losing season, I just expect a winning season more than anything else. And that's just been the standard with this team since I was in elementary school. I just can't see this team going under 500. It's just impossible for me, especially if they have a quarterback that can do something and a head coach that when it was in the absolute worst situation ever for this team offensively, still dragged this team to a 500 record.
Yeah, you're right. Betting against Mike Tomlin, at least having a 500 season, probably not your best bet. But I went back and forth the 9-8 and 8-9. I just the schedule, and I'm probably more worried about the offensive line than maybe the most people, I guess. But I don't know. We'll have to see how. Last time they had a losing season was 2003. So I mean, it's been a long time. So
we talked about it all. We talked about it all off season with Chris Carter, and there's always like a flashpoint in the Steelers season that's always the difference between them potentially having a higher draft pick or a lower draft pick. You think about the situation where they could have gotten Patrick Willis if they lost against Cincinnati in like 2006, opposed to Lawrence Timmons. Both good players in their own right and all that stuff. And really, they could have gone either way. But still, that's just how it is with this team. It's like when it's in the balance, I expect them to somehow find a way.
Well, they definitely have talented receiving core. Pat Freiermuth now, along with Eric Ebron, they got their bell cow running back in Najee Harris. So they do have the weapons. I just, it goes back to offensive line and how Roethlisberger performs late in the year. And, the defense, they should get good pressure as they've been for the last several years. I think it just comes down to how they cover in the middle of the defense with their linebackers. They went out and got Joe Schobert, which they really needed, man. Robert Spillane, he fell off big time there in the preseason.
Clipped hard.
Yeah, and they have Devin Bush who's coming off an ACL, so we'll have to see how he starts in the beginning of the season when it comes to covering tight ends and running backs. But and then just the secondary, you have Joe Hayden, who's a still very good player, but he is getting up there, and Cam Sutton is supposed to be cornerback number 2, so we'll have to see if there's any drop off there from him and Steven Nelson.
So real quick, let's talk about the cuts for the Steelers and also the new acquisition. So it seems that Josh Dobbs was on the injured reserve now, so that allowed them to keep him along with Dwayne Haskins and Mason Rudolph. Of course, Dwayne did not do well in that final preseason game. I think that was his one shot at QB2, barring injury. And they decided to cut Quincy Roche, who was going to seem like he was going to end up on the practice squad, but the Giants picked him up. I expect that if Roche goes back onto waivers, the Steelers will eventually pick him up because they still need outside linebacker depth. And you don't draft a guy for a reason. I think that was just trying to see if they can put him on the practice squad, and it didn't work out. That's because of Jameer Jones. And they acquired Witherspoon from Seattle, and to make that roster room, they had to release Henry Mondo. And I think that's a 6'3" rangy corner. That's the first for the Steelers. They don't typically go for these big corners. I think the biggest they typically go is 6'1" to maybe 5'10", 5'11". So I'm welcome for that change. A big rangy guy who did pretty good in a couple drills in the combine. So yeah, that's going to be solid.
Yeah, I've been reading that he's mostly an outside cornerback, Witherspoon. So it makes you wonder, do you think they're going to move Cam Sutton, permanently to slot cornerback, or do you think Witherspoon is a fallback option for James Pierre's in case it doesn't work out for him?
I just think that I look at that size out there and I look at the big receivers that they have to deal with in the league, and the Steelers, again, I think if I take a look at that entire secondary, he's probably the biggest player in the secondary right now.
Oh yeah, James Pierre's pretty big, but I don't think he's 6'3".
I just want to see that difference out there, and hey, maybe he can become the new Steelers outside boundary cornerback. They could develop another one in there, and then maybe they can have in the future Witherspoon on one side, Sutton on the other, and maybe Pierre as the nickel cornerback. But in terms of that, I like that the Steelers decided to go out of their comfort zone with cornerback size. The size matters with that because there are some bigger wide receivers, and you just want to have that ranginess back there.
And they needed some depth too, because across the board on the defense, they don't really have the best depth other than defensive line. They have a couple good backups there, but Ingram was a big signing there for the number 3 outside linebacker, and Jameer Jones has come on. Safety, they don't have very great depth at safety if in case Fitzpatrick or Edmonds went down with the injury. And
we forgot to mention Carl Joseph. They got him on the practice squad. I formally expect that guy to be up on the 53-man very soon because that's going to provide safety depth that we were trying to clamor for over the summer. Joseph got picked up by the Raiders and he got released, and the Steelers signed him into their practice squad. So that's the safety depth that they need. So as far as I'm concerned, that guy has. They had
Miles Killebrew and Trey Norwood. They had previous to Carl Joseph, and I'm not too sure if they're going to line him up. I know he's listed as a safety, but he could also play in the slot also. So maybe he takes that Mike Hilton role to get promoted to the 53-man roster. So as of right now, he's on the practice squad, but I think he'll be on the 53 by the time the game by Sunday, right?
Who knows what the Steelers are thinking of right now.
Also, inside linebacker depth behind Schobert and Bush. Who they have right now? Marcus Allen, I guess.
I know that their nickel package is 335, so I expect them to see more nickel this game out of the Bills and maybe over the course of the season. That's one of the reasons why they got Killebrew, because he's a linebacker safety hybrid just like Allen, so they could probably have someone in there as a dime backer in some situations.
That's a big thing right there. I think that's one of the biggest question marks is how the Steelers are going to handle that nickel, dime looks, their sub-package situations.
Oh, regardless.
Yeah, are they going to put Fitzpatrick in the box? Or are they just going to leave him what they have been doing with just, back there posted up at free safety?
They have Terrell Edmonds also that could play up as a box safety. They have a lot of pieces. It's just unproven and maybe less than ideal in some situations. That's what we're going to find out with this Steelers team. It's how much can they adjust around to the personnel that they have, because last year offensively there was trouble with them adjusting around to personnel in terms of what they did, and when they did do the adjustments, it was less than ideal. Defensively, being that Tomlin's a defensive coach, I kind of put him in there as the true defensive coordinator in ways, so I expect him to be fine with any adjustments making on that side of the ball. It's offensive adjustments that worry me about the Steelers. I know that somehow, some way, the Steelers could have you and me out there at linebacker and they'll somehow make it work. I don't have that belief offensively at times.
Yeah, we'll have to see what they were Matt Canada, the new offense coordinator. I don't think it could get any worse creativity-wise with Randy Fichtner last year.
Yeah, well, we'll find out about that. So that's all for our first team preview podcast of the year. Of course, we're going to have plenty of these over the course of the next 17 weeks, minus the bye week. We'll have a season review part in the bye week, and hopefully there's no extreme COVID situations that put that plans in a wrench. And of course, we'll talk to other bloggers, reporters, announcers around the league. And then on after games, probably a few days after it, you'll hear us alongside Brandon Walker break down the previous game and what we want to see in the future out of the Steelers. So until then, Steelers fans, strap up. It's going to be a great year, and we'll hope to see you then. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.